Hi, this is Sean Hafer, and in this tutorial, we're going to look at some of the pitfalls you can run into when you're bringing some of your line studies over into Illustrator, perhaps to resize them and to clean them up, and then also taking those into After Effects. So I'm going to start out and just say I had created this in Illustrator before, and we've got a CMYK document, and we have all of our kind of black lines on our white area here. So one thing I know is I want to take this into RGB, and we want our size to be 700 by 700. So I believe this is 1200 by 1200. So what I'm going to do is just create a new doc, and I'm going to go ahead and do new. And this time I'm just going to go to 700 by 700. And the big thing here is make sure I'm in RGB. And that looks good. And then what I want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and call this vertical RGB. All right, so I'll create that. Now I've got my new document set up here. So one easy way to do this, just go ahead and select everything and copy it, come over to the new one and paste. Now it's going to be very, very big. So with that all still connected, now you can see there's no white. That was just using the white of the artboard. So we'll have to sort of create that. But what I'll do first is just get to my corner point, make sure I'm there, have everything selected with a Command A or Control A. And then I'm going to come in and just make sure with my shift down, I can scale it so it stays right in there. Okay. So let's zoom in a little, make sure that looks good. All right. Now we're going to have a couple issues here. So one is we don't have the white background. Another one is the CMYK black doesn't come over as black. So it may have been that the black was just at 100 and your CM and Y were down at 0. It's also just an issue with coming over from CMYK. So what we can do, let's go ahead first and select all these. Okay, now this one is a stroke, and we'll deal with that here in a second, but I'll go ahead and select that path. And if I come over here now and I go to since we've got both, let me go ahead and do these first. Okay, so these are fills with no stroke, and that is a stroke with no fill. So if I double click on my swatch here, we can see this is not black, right? We're kind of somewhere up here. If we look at our RGB, we're at 35, 31, 32. So what I want to do is bring that down to 0, 0, 0 in my RGB. That should be fine. Hit OK. Now you can see that difference. Now that gets us to black there. And then let's go ahead and select this one. Same thing on our stroke. Come in here and make sure we're down at 0, 0, 0 in our RGB. Okay, that looks good. Now, if we bring this over into After Effects, it is just going to come in as a path with a stroke on it. It's not going to give us some of the abilities we might want to use. So if we come in here and we select this and we go up to Object, and we want to come down here to Expand. And Expand Fill, Expand Stroke. That's fine. Hit OK. And now we can see that switched. We now have a black fill with no stroke, and it is an object. And now we just want to go ahead and check our black. It's still not quite black, so let's go ahead and bring that into our 0, 0, 0 and hit OK. Okay, so now we've got our blacks as RGB blacks, because when we're working in After Effects, we're in RGB. And then we also want to look at now having this sort of white background. Now, if you want to have your stripes come in onto a white field, or maybe you want white stripes to come onto a black field, or you want your white and your black stripes to come in different ways, maybe a gray field, what you can do here is come in and I'm going to create a new background. So a new rectangle. I'm just going to get up to my anchor point and I'm going to just come down there and I'm going to make this white. Let's come up here, 255, 255, 255 on my RGB and hit OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and let's move that to the back. So you can do that with Command Shift and your left bracket or Control Shift left bracket. So now that's back behind there. And if we select all, I mean, we could draw those, new white rectangles, but a great way to do this is just select all, and then we'll come over to our Pathfinder, roll down here, and we want to do divide. All right, and so now that should have broken everything up. Let's go back to our selection tool by hitting V. If we look here, now the thing is, it automatically groups those when you do a divide, so just click on your ungroup, or go up here to your object, and it would be ungroup here. And then let's do the same thing. We can look. Now we've got all our individual layers there. So we can click on this. Oh, let me double check here. 1, 2, these guys. So we've got our individual blacks here. And then we want to do the same thing with our white. We can see we've got our individual whites. All right. So if we then come in, now the next step would be, we've got all our shapes. We need to get these all on their own layers. We don't want any grouped layers. So what we can do is come over here to our layers. And if we take our top layer here, what we want to do is come into our little hamburger menu up here, and we want to release to layers sequence. All right, and so everything now, even if you had things grouped in different layers, will become its own layer. Now, the only thing now what to do is take everything, just shift select them, and then move them up out of that group. Everything's there, it's its own separate. And now if we save this, so we can say File, Save As. I've got a little folder here, and I'm going to call this, again, Vertical RGB AI. That's what we named it. This should be ready to go. So let me go ahead and save in that folder. Okay, Illustrator 2020, that's great. Everything should be fine there. Now we've got our blacks black. We've got our strokes released. We've got our white shapes and our black shapes all separate. So if I come into After Effects and I load that up, and we'll do a new project. And so what I'm going to do, what our final sizes for this is 1000 by 1000 on 50% gray. So I'm going to do new composition, hit OK. And so I'm going to do a new composition. And then I'm going to come in here and do (1000 by 1000). Square pixels, 24 frames a second. That's perfect. 5 seconds is our max. Background color doesn't really matter. And I'll hit OK. And now we've got that. So now if we want to import our Illustrator file, and let's go to our desktop. I've got that in this folder, Black and White Systems, and we want the RGB. And that seems fine. I'll import as footage. Actually, we can do input as composition, retain layer sizes. And then I'll hit import. And now this can be a nested comp inside of our other comp. So let's say I now drag this down here. It's centered up, right? So we've got all of our pieces inside of this comp. And if I wanted to edit my animation inside there, I could just double click it, open it up in its own, and maybe I take all of these and set my final position. So maybe I'm going to wrap up right about half a second before 5 seconds. And maybe I set my positions. All right. So I set a position keyframe in the final space for all of that. And then come back here somewhere, and maybe I'm going to take my blacks, hold down Shift and move them way up. Now what I could do, depending on what you're having happen, so I could have these come out here, and then take all my white stripes, and then move those all here. So that's on that beginning keyframe. And now that'll just create a simple kind of both stripes coming in. Okay, now we can't see our blacks on here because our comp is got a background, but let me turn on my transparency, and now you can see our whites and blacks come in. So if we go back to our untitled comp here, and let's say we came in here, so now you can see that way they will animate inside of their own comp, right? If you want them to cross over the background, which we should make a 50% gray, so let's create a layer, new, solid. And I'm going to come in here with my color, and I'm going to bring it way over here and just make my black 50%, right? And that should be fine. I mean, I could bring hue all the way down if I want, but long as it's black is 50%, that's all we need. Saturation at 0. So hit OK. That'll give me my 50%, and I'll make comp size and hit OK. And then if we just move that layer below, that's our background. Maybe you want to rename it. So remember, hit Enter. There we go. We've got that. That's all set. We could lock that down just so we don't accidentally move it. Okay. So now you can see on that 50% gray, these come in this way. Now, if you wanted to animate inside the 1000 by 1000, you could just import those layers not inside the comp, and that could work that way. Or you could come up and on your comp position, if you come to your composition settings, we could change that, in our vertical RGB composition settings. We could change that to 1000 by 1000. And hit OK. And now you'll see that will be kind of in, that'll now show everything inside that 1000 by 1000. So if you wanted to animate these all the way off, say we went back to 0, we come back to vertical RGB, we can now see that's 1000 by 1000, and we could take all of these and maybe drag them out all the way. So they start, off there. Same thing with these. Just holding down Shift to keep them scaled. And then if we go back to our main comp, they will come in over the gray. So depending on how you want to do that. If you want all your animation to stay inside the 700 by 700 comp and not cross over the gray, that's one option. If you want it to come over the gray, make sure your comp is 1000 by 1000. And I think that's it. And again, just remember, you can come in just for some of, the easiest idea for any of these. If we think of our keyframes here, so if we come in here and select all of our keyframes, especially at the end, and you can either F9 or right click keyframe assistant and give a nice little easy ease. And that will give you that kind of nice settle down at the end. And if you want to, you can get into the graph editor and do a little more sophisticated editing. Okay, well, I hope that helps. If you have any questions, just reach out, and thanks for watching.